In early February 2025, former U.S. President Donald Trump unveiled a highly controversial proposal to take over the Gaza Strip, suggesting that the United States should facilitate the relocation of nearly 2 million Palestinian residents and transform the region into a prosperous economic hub. This announcement was made during a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on February 4, 2025, and has since elicited widespread international condemnation. Trump's vision for Gaza. Trump described Gaza as a demolition site with immense potential for redevelopment, proposing a long-term ownership position for the U.S. in the area. He characterized the initiative as a bold step toward economic transformation akin to turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. His comments indicated a willingness to deploy U.S. troops to oversee the operation. Despite his previous stance of avoiding foreign entanglements under the America First doctrine. Immediate backlash. The proposal drew immediate and vehement backlash from a range of political leaders, legal experts, and humanitarian organizations. Criticism focused on the legality and ethical implications of forcibly relocating Palestinians, which many experts characterized as reminiscent of colonial practices. Natasha Hall, a senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, called the idea illegal, arguing that it harkens back to a time when forced population transfers were common. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas condemned the proposal, labeling it a serious violation of international law. Arab leaders, including Jordan's King Abdullah II, echoed these sentiments, emphasizing their commitment to a two-state solution and rejecting any notion of resettling Palestinians in their countries. The response from Hamas was particularly fierce, with officials branding Trump's plan a recipe for chaos and affirming that the people of Gaza would resist such efforts. Context of the proposal. Trump's remarks came at a time when negotiations for a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza were ongoing. The timing has led some analysts to speculate that the proposal may have been designed to distract from these negotiations or to pressure Arab nations into taking a more active role in managing the Palestinian situation. While Netanyahu appeared supportive of the idea, the broader Arab world responded with skepticism. The proposal has been perceived as a significant deviation from traditional U.S. policy concerning the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has historically favored a two-state solution. Critics argue that Trump's approach could undermine any progress toward peace, instead exacerbating tensions in an already volatile region. Legal and diplomatic challenges. The suggestion of U.S. control over Gaza raises numerous legal and diplomatic issues. Experts assert that a unilateral takeover would likely violate international law, particularly regarding the sovereignty of the Palestinian territories. The regional response has been overwhelmingly negative, with many Arab leaders stating that displacement is not a viable solution. Concerns have also been raised about the potential security risks associated with deploying U.S. troops in Gaza. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander General Wesley Clark warned that such a military presence could provoke violent resistance and lead to a prolonged military entanglement in the region, further complicating the situation. Broader implications. The fallout from Trump's proposal extends beyond immediate diplomatic tensions. It has prompted discussions about the future of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, particularly regarding relations with Arab nations. Many observers note that Trump's comments could diminish the chances of achieving a lasting peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians, as they may alienate key stakeholders in the region. Moreover, the proposal has intensified debates within the U.S. about the direction of American foreign policy. While some Trump allies may support the initiative, many Democrats and even some Republicans have voiced opposition, fearing that such actions could lead to military conflicts and a humanitarian crisis. Conclusion. In summary, Trump's renewed vision for Gaza has ignited a firestorm of criticism both domestically and internationally. The proposal illustrates the complex interplay of U.S. foreign policy, regional geopolitics, and long-standing humanitarian issues. As political leaders around the world respond to this controversial initiative, It remains to be seen how Trump's plan will influence the future of Gaza and the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The developments in the coming weeks will likely shape not only the fate of the region but also the trajectory of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East for years to come. Donald Trump's proposal to take over the Gaza Strip has generated intense debate and backlash, particularly given its implications for international law, regional stability, and humanitarian concerns. Here are some counterintuitive aspects of the situation. 1. Perceived legitimacy amid criticism. While Trump's plan has drawn widespread condemnation for its legality and ethical implications, it paradoxically suggests that there exists a level of discourse in the international arena where extreme proposals gain traction, forcing other nations and policymakers to respond and clarify their positions. In a sense, Trump's approach challenges accepted norms and compels a re-examination of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East despite the overwhelming negativity surrounding it. 2. Potential for diplomatic leverage. Some analysts interpret Trump's radical suggestion as a strategy to compel Arab nations such as Egypt and Jordan to take more concrete actions regarding Palestinian refugees. By proposing an extreme measure, Trump might inadvertently be pushing these states to formulate alternative solutions which could lead to unexpected diplomatic dynamics in the region. 3. Military deployment versus America First philosophy. Trump's suggestion of deploying U.S. troops to oversee the reconstruction of Gaza contradicts his America First rhetoric, which typically advocates for minimal foreign entanglements. This presents a complex dichotomy where a proposal that is ostensibly about American interests leads to a potential scenario that could embroil the U.S. in another prolonged military engagement. Negating his previous promises to avoid such situations. 4. Impact on the two-state solution. Despite appearing to undermine the long-standing U.S. support for a two-state solution, Trump's proposal could inadvertently reignite discussions around this framework. By presenting a drastic alternative, he may force stakeholders to reaffirm their commitment to a two-state solution to counteract his vision, thereby highlighting the fragility of the current status quo. 5. Reactions from regional leaders. The mixed responses from regional leaders, where Netanyahu shows some support while other Arab leaders outright reject the proposal, underscore a potential shift in how Israeli-Palestinian relations are framed. The divergence in responses may signal a recalibration in alliances and rhetoric, where Trump's plan could act as a catalyst for renewed dialogue among nations that have historically held opposing views. 6. Public sentiment and political fallout. Trump's proposal may alienate not only international allies but also domestic political factions. However, it also serves to galvanize his base by positioning him as a bold figure willing to tackle what he frames as an intractable problem, thus complicating the narrative around public sentiment regarding U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts. 7. Economic aspirations versus humanitarian costs. Trump's framing of Gaza as a demolition site ripe for redevelopment highlights a stark contrast between economic opportunity and the humanitarian crisis at hand. This notion may resonate with a segment of the American populace that views foreign policy through a transactional lens, contrasting sharply with the moral imperatives emphasized by critics. 8. Long-term versus short-term policy goals. The proposal illustrates a tension between immediate geopolitical maneuvers and long-term strategic objectives. While it may serve short-term political goals, the long-term implications for U.S. credibility and relationships in the Middle East could be severely detrimental, suggesting that radical proposals can have a dual-edged impact. In conclusion, Trump's plan to take over Gaza presents a complex interplay of geopolitical strategy, humanitarian ethics, and regional dynamics that defy straightforward interpretations. The reactions and consequences of this proposal may reshape the discourse around U.S. involvement in the Middle East and challenge existing frameworks for peace and cooperation. Donald Trump's recent proposal to take over Gaza has stirred significant controversy, raising numerous legal, political, and humanitarian concerns that many commentators have overlooked. Here are some critical elements of this proposal that deserve more attention. 1. Historical context of forced displacement. Trump's idea of relocating nearly 2 million Palestinians resonates with a dark history of forced displacement, particularly in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The suggestion echoes the mass displacement during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War known as the Nakba catastrophe for Palestinians. This historical parallel is significant because it highlights the potential for Trump's plan to exacerbate existing traumas and grievances among Palestinians. Understanding this context is crucial as it informs the emotional and political reactions to any proposed displacement, making it a sensitive issue that could inflame tensions further rather than lead to resolution. 2. Legal implications and violation of international law. Many commentators have pointed out that Trump's proposal could violate international law. Specifically, the forcible displacement of a civilian population and the unilateral annexation of territory are considered serious breaches of the Geneva Conventions. Legal scholars and human rights advocates have emphasized that such actions could classify as war crimes. This aspect is often underestimated in discussions about the feasibility of the plan, as the legal ramifications could lead to severe diplomatic backlash against the United States, isolating it from its allies and damaging its international standing. 3. Reactions from the Arab world. The Arab world's response to the proposal has been largely negative, with regional leaders reaffirming their commitment to a two-state solution. The failure to fully engage with this aspect in mainstream discourse can be misleading. It overlooks the potential destabilizing effects of the proposal on U.S.-Arab relations. Leaders like King Abdullah II of Jordan have publicly rejected Trump's approach, emphasizing that forced resettlement is not an option. This rejection highlights the regional consensus against such radical measures, which could further alienate the U.S. from key allies in the Middle East. 4. Impact on ongoing ceasefire negotiations. Trump's remarks come at a sensitive time when negotiations for a ceasefire and hostages release are underway. The proposal may undermine these fragile discussions by hardening positions on all sides. Hamas has already condemned the plan, suggesting it could incite further violence rather than foster an environment conducive to peace. The potential for such a proposal to derail ongoing negotiations underscores the importance of contextualizing Trump's comments within the broader framework of conflict resolution efforts. 5. Perception of U.S. military presence. The potential deployment of U.S. troops to enforce control in Gaza raises significant concerns about military entanglement and the historical context of U.S. involvement in the Middle East. Critics have pointed out that such a presence could lead to increased anti-American sentiment and violence, similar to the backlash experienced during the Iraq War. The implication that U.S. forces would be viewed as occupiers rather than peacekeepers reflects a profound misunderstanding of local dynamics and could have long-lasting implications for U.S. foreign policy in the region. 6. Economic motivations and real estate perspective. Trump's framing of Gaza as a demolition site ripe for redevelopment reflects a real estate-driven perspective on foreign policy that many experts have critiqued. This attitude reduces complex geopolitical issues to mere economic opportunities, neglecting the humanitarian and social dimensions of the conflict. The emphasis on turning Gaza into a prosperous economic hub raises ethical questions about prioritizing profit over the rights and dignity of the Palestinian population. This commodification of territory and its inhabitants is a significant aspect that warrants deeper examination. 7. Domestic political calculations. The timing of Trump's proposal may also be politically motivated, aimed at galvanizing support among his base by presenting a bold foreign policy vision. However, this strategy could backfire, as many Americans across the political spectrum view the proposal as dangerous and impractical. The backlash from both Democrats and moderate Republicans suggests that Trump's plan may alienate potential allies and complicate his administration's domestic political landscape. 8. Global implications. The international backlash to the proposal is not just limited to the Arab world. It could have broader implications for U.S. relations with other nations. Countries that have traditionally supported U.S. foreign policy may view this proposal as a significant departure from established norms, prompting them to reassess their alliances with Washington. This could lead to a realignment of international relations where countries may seek closer ties with rivals of the U.S. such as Russia or China. In summary, Trump's Gaza proposal is laden with complexities that extend far beyond the surface-level implications of territorial control and economic development. The historical, legal, regional, and global contexts surrounding this proposal reveal a landscape fraught with risks that demand careful consideration and a nuanced understanding of the potential consequences for both the U.S. and the broader Middle East. 1. Legal and ethical implications of Trump's proposal. Trump's suggested takeover of Gaza and the relocation of its nearly 2 million Palestinian residents raises significant legal and ethical concerns. Critics, including international law experts, argue that such actions would violate international law and could be classified as a war crime. The proposal is seen by many as a throwback to colonial practices, echoing sentiments from the colonial era when territories were seized and populations forcibly relocated. The strong backlash from global leaders, including Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who labeled it a serious violation of international law, underscores the contentious nature of Trump's plan. Additionally, the ethical implications of displacing a population with deep historical ties to the land and the potential humanitarian crisis that could ensue are critical points for discussion. 2. Geopolitical repercussions and regional stability. Trump's plan has sparked immediate and widespread criticism across the Arab world, with regional leaders reaffirming their commitment to a two-state solution and rejecting the notion of resettling Palestinians in neighboring countries. This resistance highlights the fragility of U.S. relations with key Middle Eastern allies such as Jordan and Egypt, which have historically been involved in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. The potential for increased tensions and destabilization in the region is considerable, as groups like Hamas have already condemned the proposal as a recipe for chaos. Furthermore, Trump's idea of deploying U.S. troops to oversee the operation raises concerns about military entanglement and the likelihood of violent resistance, further complicating the geopolitical landscape. 3. Economic rationale versus humanitarian needs. Trump's characterization of Gaza as a demolition site ripe for redevelopment reflects a real estate-driven approach to foreign policy that prioritizes economic opportunities over the complex political and humanitarian realities on the ground. The proposal to transform Gaza into a prosperous economic hub raises fundamental questions about the feasibility of such a vision in a region mired in conflict. Critics argue that this economic rationale overlooks the urgent need for humanitarian assistance and the restoration of stability and law in Gaza. The focus on economic redevelopment could also detract from addressing the root causes of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, ultimately complicating efforts toward lasting peace and reconciliation. 4. Impact on U.S. domestic politics and international standing. Trump's Gaza takeover proposal has significant implications for U.S. domestic politics, particularly in terms of party unity and the response from both Democratic and Republican leaders. The proposal has already drawn sharp criticism from within the Democratic Party and raises questions about the GOP's stance on foreign policy under Trump's leadership. Additionally, the international backlash against the proposal could further tarnish the U.S.'s reputation as a facilitator of peace in the Middle East, as global leaders express skepticism and concern. Trump's actions risk alienating traditional allies and undermining the credibility of the U.S. in international diplomacy. This situation poses a critical opportunity for political leaders to re-evaluate their positions and strategies regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and U.S. foreign policy more broadly. 1. The partition of India 1947. The partition of British India into the independent states of India and Pakistan involved the mass relocation of populations based on religious lines, resulting in significant violence and humanitarian crises. The displacement of millions of people and the ensuing communal riots are often cited as one of the largest forced migrations in history, raising questions about sovereignty, territorial claims, and the impacts of colonial legacies. 2. The displacement of Native Americans. 19th century. In the United States, the forced removal of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands, particularly through policies like the Indian Removal Act of 1830, is a historical example of the consequences of governmental policies aimed at territorial acquisition. The Trail of Tears, where thousands of Native Americans were forcibly relocated, exemplifies the human suffering resulting from such actions and the legal and moral controversies surrounding them. 3. The Suez Crisis. 1956. The Suez Crisis involved a military intervention by Israel, the United Kingdom, and France and Egypt following Egypt's nationalization of the Suez Canal. The crisis showcased the complex interplay of international politics, colonial legacies, and the rights of nations. The invasion was condemned globally, leading to a withdrawal and highlighting the illegitimacy of unilateral military actions aimed at territorial control without international consensus. Future outlook. Predictions for American influence in Gaza 2025 to 2035. As we enter the next decade following Donald Trump's controversial proposal to take over the Gaza Strip, the implications of this bold initiative are expected to resonate across both the geopolitical landscape and humanitarian corridors. Here are several predictions regarding the future of American influence in Gaza and the broader Middle East. 1. Increased tensions and resistance. Trump's vision of a U.S. takeover of Gaza, characterized by the forced relocation of nearly 2 million Palestinians, will likely ignite significant resistance within the Palestinian territories and among surrounding Arab nations. This proposal, viewed as a violation of international law, will exacerbate anti-American sentiments and possibly lead to increased violence. The expectation is that Hamas and other militant groups will intensify their activities, framing U.S. involvement as an occupation, which could lead to a resurgence of armed conflict. 2. Shift in U.S. foreign policy. The backlash to Trump's proposal will pressure future U.S. administrations to recalibrate their approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. A growing chorus of voices, both domestically and internationally, will advocate for a return to a two-state solution framework, emphasizing diplomacy over military engagement. Analysts predict that regardless of party affiliation, U.S. policymakers will increasingly seek to distance themselves from the perception of imperialistic ambitions in the region. 3. International legal ramifications. Trump's call for a takeover and potential military presence in Gaza may lead to significant legal challenges, both within the U.S. and internationally. Legal scholars and human rights organizations will likely mobilize to challenge the legality of any military intervention or forced population transfer in international courts. The U.S. could face sanctions or diplomatic isolation from nations that view these actions as violations of international law, particularly as allies like Jordan and Egypt explicitly reject such proposals. 4. Regional realignments. The fallout from Trump's Gaza proposal could catalyze a realignment of alliances in the Middle East. Countries such as Jordan and Egypt, which have historically played mediating roles, may seek to distance themselves from U.S. influence if they perceive it as undermining their national interests. Additionally, regional powers like Turkey and Iran might seize the opportunity to bolster their influence among Palestinians and in broader Arab nationalist movements, further complicating U.S. efforts to stabilize the region. 5. Humanitarian crisis and international aid. If the U.S. attempts to implement Trump's vision, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is expected to deteriorate significantly. International humanitarian organizations may find themselves overwhelmed by the scale of displacement and destruction, necessitating a large influx of aid. However, U.S. foreign aid policies may face severe scrutiny, with increasing calls for accountability and a shift towards unconditional humanitarian assistance rather than politically motivated aid. 6. Long-term military presence. Should Trump's plans escalate into a military endeavor, the U.S. could find itself entrenched in a prolonged occupation of Gaza, mirroring historical precedents in Iraq and Afghanistan. Military experts warn that such a scenario could lead to significant American casualties and drain U.S. resources, prompting public backlash against further foreign military engagements. 7. Influence of non-state actors. The landscape of influence in Gaza will increasingly be shaped by non-state actors, including NGOs and humanitarian organizations. As local governance structures become strained under potential U.S. oversight, these organizations may emerge as critical players in providing essential services in governance, challenging the traditional state-based power dynamics. 8. Technological and economic investments. If the U.S. does manage to stabilize Gaza through economic development initiatives, there could be opportunities for technological investments in infrastructure and economic revitalization. However, any such investments will require a stable political environment, which remains uncertain given the prevailing tensions. The potential for Gaza to become an economic hub will depend heavily on the ability to secure peace and a cooperative regional environment. 9. Changing perspectives on American intervention. As the international community reacts to Trump's proposals, American public opinion regarding foreign interventions may shift. Growing wariness of military entanglements in the Middle East could lead to a bipartisan consensus on the need for a more restrained foreign policy that prioritizes diplomacy and multilateral cooperation over unilateral action. 10. Legacy of Trump's presidency. Ultimately, Trump's approach to Gaza will likely become a significant aspect of his legacy, shaping future discussions on American foreign policy. The extent to which his proposals are viewed as successful or disastrous will influence political narratives and campaigns in the coming years as both parties reassess their strategies toward the Middle East and international relations as a whole. In summary, the future of American influence in Gaza and the broader Middle East will be fraught with challenges stemming from Trump's controversial proposals. While there may be opportunities for economic development and diplomatic engagement, the prevailing realities of resistance, legal ramifications, and humanitarian crises will dominate the landscape, shaping the trajectory of U.S. involvement in the region for years to come.